I've got a very, very, very close friend of mine and colleague that everybody will know, especially City fans, Ian Cheeseman, on with me to do something that I've been looking forward to doing, Ian, and it's celebrating the 500th day since Manchester City finally and eventually lifted the trophy that people often see as the biggest one of all in the Champions League. So the roles have reversed slightly, Ian, but welcome to this conversation. And hopefully it's an enjoyable one for however long this episode lasts for. So welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
No problem. Take you right back into Istanbul, of course. Just want to kind of look at Istanbul as a place, really, and talk about the football heritage of that part of Turkey. And I know growing up as a kid, there was never really a rivalry with Liverpool. I don't know about you, but I remember sitting up the night that Liverpool lifted the Champions League trophy after that unbelievable comeback against AC Milan, and was actually quite pleased to see Liverpool win that penalty shootout. And Jerzy Dudek, as illegal as those dance moves would be now, save that penalty and allow Liverpool to do something that would rub it in the Man United fans' faces, truth be told. But it was, all them years on, really nice to do it ourselves in Istanbul and have our own night in Istanbul, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Istanbul is particularly significant to me, not just because of lifting the trophy, which of course was what I'd dreamed of since I'd watched Champions League football when City weren't involved in it and watched everybody else involved in it, the big clubs, so to speak. But I don't know if you realise this, but back in 1968, City's one and only European Cup game before the modern era was against the Turkish side. And I wrote Colin Bell's autobiography, or with him, and he talked about playing Fenerbahce. It was a 0-0 draw at home and a 1-0 defeat away, and talked about the intense atmosphere. City didn't progress from that. They went on to win the European Cup Winners' Cup the following season, but that was their only venture in the European Cup as was until the modern era. And I've been lucky enough to attend, apart from behind closed doors games, all of the Champions League games since then, and that's been some travelling and some journey. So it all started, I would argue, for City in Turkey with the Fenerbahce game, or the two legs of the Fenerbahce game. And then the other thing that makes it particularly significant to me is that our captain on the day when that trophy was lifted 500 days ago was İlkay Gündoğan, who is a German but of Turkish descent. There is a large population of Turks, expats, if you want to call them that, in Gelsenkirchen, Schalke, which is where he was born, along with Mesut Özil and Manuel Neuer and people like that. They sort of went to the same school. And for him, as a young Turk, as I say, German international and everything, but with Turkish heritage, to be our captain who lifted the trophy in Turkey, in Istanbul, was particularly poignant, and for me even more because he wore the number 8 shirt, he was the captain, he was wearing the Colin Bell commemorative shirt, if you like, with the crown in the back, everything just aligned. But the fact that he was actually, of Turkish descent and lifted it in Turkey, to me, just made it all the more poignant.
Yeah, I think being a City fan, Ian, over the years, we're from completely different generations, yet we have so many conversations on your podcast, Forever Blue, and with everybody that's involved in that, all the members of the pod, the panel, the regulars, the footballers that you get on, the guests, we all come from different walks of life. We've all had different lives with City in it as a constant. One thing we can agree on is that City are poetic, and granted, outsiders will always say that in the last 16 years, the club has become whatever the club has become. But one thing I will always say is that our club, more than many, often provides these moments that just fit together like jigsaw pieces that you can't quite understand, and yet on occasions like that, things fit into place. We had a media-fueled rivalry, in my opinion, with Liverpool. They lifted that trophy in 2005. Years on, we go and lift the trophy in the same stadium around the same time of night with, like you say, a Turkish German İlkay Gündoğan lifting it with your favourite player Colin Bell, who wore the number 8, and he did it in sky blue for City, and it sickened Liverpool fans. I think there's something pretty poetic about all of that. And, I think when you take the money out of the game, Ian, and you take the fact that we're a financial giant now in the world of football, I think we all watch football for sentiment, and we all watch football for moments and for euphoria and for spine-tingling moments and for like I said, sentimental stuff that just makes you kind of warm inside. And I think that that's something that I have to agree with you on. Although we're born in different generations and have seen different amounts of City games, I think at that moment we were almost connected, as was every other City fan, with thinking, wow, this is pretty special. The way it was won, the goal, outstanding. 500 days, Ian, what have you done in that time, mate? What have you achieved in that time? How many podcasts have you done? What have you been able to experience in Europe since? And how many games have you attended?
Well, I've attended every game. So, I mean, it's in my blood. I mean, I know that City are a global club now, and some people will say that's brilliant. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a Mancunian. The nearest club to where I was born was City, and I've been watching them all my life. And whilst they've now become a global club with fans all around the world, at their heart, they're still, as far as I'm concerned, a Mancunian club. And there are parts of me, I mean, I've lived the dream, absolutely, the luckiest person on the planet, because the timeline of my enjoyment of watching City stretches back to Bell, Lee and Summerby and Glimpardo and Tony Buck and all the rest of it. I got to see those players play, albeit in the early part of my footballing life. But then I watched the journey through Rodney Marsh and Dennis Stewart and Peter Barnes, who was a big hero of mine. Eventually the relegations, the struggles in the lower leagues, the Swales era when finances were not particularly good. Fans rebelled and protests outside the stadium, forward with Franny and all that sort of stuff. Going down at Stoke despite winning to the third tier, looking like we weren't going to come back. Playoff final, just about scraping over the line in that penalty shootout, and then Keegan come in. There are obviously a lot of things I'm missing out here, but Keegan with that great season when we came back, and then watching them lift the trophy in 2012, the Premier League trophy, for the first time since '68, being behind the microphone for the BBC, which was my dream job, which I did for some 15 or 16 years alongside great former players of the past. And I've seen everything. I hosted the Junior Blues. I was a stadium announcer. I've done forums for the club, you name it. And so I've been on the most remarkable journey there. That Champions League victory in Istanbul, in some ways, felt like the end of the story for me. I mean, I'm still here. I'm still vlogging. I'm still podcasting. But it feels like you could argue that going to Jeddah and watching them lift the Club World Cup, whilst not quite as significant for me as winning the Champions League, was the final sort of tick in the final box of wanting to see it all. I've seen them win the treble. I've seen them win the domestic quadruple. I've seen them win the treble and the World Club Cup and the Super Cup all in the same calendar year.
Yeah,
it doesn't get any better than that. We've been watching the greatest manager that's ever been at the club in Pep Guardiola, a man of great integrity, a man even if he didn't win all these things, just as a human being, one of the finest human beings I believe that there are. I can't deny that there's a bit of me now that doesn't feel quite the same way that I once did, having completed that journey. And as the club becomes more and more detached from its core fan base, that does upset me a little. But, I can't complain, because I've been on this amazing journey. I've been very, very lucky. So many people would have, in a heartbeat, swapped places with me. So what have I got to complain about? But it does sadden me a little bit that the club is now moving away from what it once was. The price you pay, I suppose, for this ultimate ambition of being, globally dominant.
Absolutely, and I think if I take you right back to 2003, 20 years prior to us winning the Champions League, I'd have been flying out to Corfu with my mum on a holiday as a 9-year-old, and at that time I was looking forward to seeing City on television in a hotel in Corfu as a 9-year-old, playing against TNS at the City of Manchester Stadium game, of course, which we won, would have never expected us not to have won it, the most dominant side in the Welsh League at the time against the 8th most dominant side in the Premier League. 20 years on, Ian, to see us lifting the Champions League when we were actually trying to qualify for the competition beneath the Champions League and the UEFA Cup. Regardless of money, regardless of investment, whether that's been done in the correct way or not, whatever people's opinions are, if the fan base deserved to see that 20 years on, I think our fan base definitely did. And in the middle of all of it, slap bang in the middle of that match against TNS and the takeover in 2008 by Sheikh Mansour, there was a real dip that you've spoken to me about at length, in which John Wardle was vastly important in saving the football club once more after 99. And Hackney not have done that, and Taksin hadn't taken the club over, whether you think badly of him or not, we're not going into that, of course. But Sven and all of the things that went after it, happened. Sheikh Mansour never buys us. But again, we talk about poetry, we talk about dominoes falling, we talk about snowball effect, we talk about jigsaw puzzles, coming together and pieces, joining. If ever there was meant to be a jigsaw puzzle found, or a jigsaw piece found for a puzzle, it was a City one.
Don't forget the contribution of a guy called Bob Scott. So Bob Scott, who had the ambition to try to bring the Olympics to Manchester. They went to Sydney, but his ambition also led to a bid then for the Commonwealth Games, which led to the City of Manchester Stadium as it was being built, which allowed City to have this massive jump in fortunes off the field from a tired main road to a complex which, all right, it's expanded far more now under Sheikh Mansour, but because of the vision of Francis Lee, who was at the chairman, the much maligned chairman, I must say, which in some regards was fair, in some regards I thought was very unfair, but he was involved in moving City from the old main road to the new stadium, and that was key to getting the investment from initially Taksin Shinawatra and then later from Sheikh Mansour. So Bob Scott, even though he's not a City fan, indirectly was a key part of City's move from Main Road to the new stadium, which in itself then led to, because the owner who came in, or the owners that have come in that time, would not have come and invested in City had they still had that old stadium in the middle of Moss Side. The fact that they built it on the former Bradford Colliery site, which had all that land to develop, it's taken money and it's taken vision to do it, with the old dye works being neutralised and took over, and that's where the CFA is. They've now took that gasometer down at the bottom of the North Stand car park. We've seen the new arena being built, and who knows what else is going to be built around there. But none of that would have happened had we not, as a city, talking about Manchester when I talk about we, had Bob Scott not had his vision and then created the environment for City to invest in a new stadium, supported massively, of course, by the council and Sport England and people like that. So we should be very, very grateful to all those people for what they did. But if I was to pick out one man, it would be Bob Scott, even though he's not what you call a City legend or hero. And look where we are now. So
absolutely,
it's been a great. And you're right about the fans. Obviously, I'm one of the older fans these days, and there are a lot of us still go to the away games, and those are the people I feel happiest for, because they have slogged it out. They have gone round Macclesfield and Gillingham and Bristol Rovers on a Friday night and all that sort of stuff, and watching Jamie Pollock chipping it up and then heading it over the keeper into his own goal to become a QPR legend. A City we're getting relegated. So all those things have made us what we are, and that City humour comes from self-deprecation and the fact that we went through all that adversity, which the younger fans won't get anymore now, because I can't see a future where City are not right up near the top from now on. The gap's just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So they might not carry on winning every match, might not win every trophy. The total dominance will end at some point. Let's just enjoy it. But as I say, it is slightly different feeling now for me. I can only speak personally, but for me as a fan than it once was. But maybe I'm just getting old.
Ian, when you strip it all back, I mean, everything you just said is. I mean, I know a lot about yourself. I've known you for a long time. I listened to you as a kid. Thankfully we become very good friends. My partner's a huge fan of yours as well. Jess very well. I see you at every single game that I'm at. And I think sometimes, Ian, you're humble. You're humble with your approach towards fans, and I know that. There's a lot of fans that shout your name and call you nicknames and things like that they've got to know you by over the years. But there's not one City fan that doesn't admire your dedication to the football club and that doesn't see you as a constant in their City journey as well. And I think, as much as the Sheikh has brought the financial clout along, and the investment's been wonderful, and Pepper's brought the best football that you'll probably ever see in the history of football. Call me biased, call me arrogant, call me what you want. One thing I will say is, if you strip it all back in, you look at why fans go to football and what fans get out of football. If fans didn't see you for a couple of weeks, they'd wonder where you were. Do you know what I mean? And they'd wonder, what's happened to Ian, and they'd going to an away day is seeing you, you know what I mean? Whether you're vlogging or not, when you were working for the BBC or when you were working as a freelancer in your early days, or when you were working for Hospital Radio and everywhere else you'd been, there would have been fans letting on to you once you became a well-known City fan. And there's a reason why you were on the placard and why you were a little caricature with the microphone on the picture all them years ago, and I think that's because you're part of City history yourself, Ian. So if anyone deserves to have seen the journey we've been on, it's yourself, mate.
That's very kind of you to say that, but I don't see myself like you see me at all. I mean, I'm just a fan. I enjoy, and it gave me a sense of belonging when I was younger to get involved. I got involved in stewarding the football specials because my dad worked on the railways, and I travelled by railways, got to know the people who ran it, and ended up selling pies and sausage rolls and raffle tickets and everything. And it gave me the City family became my family. But I'm no better or different than any other of the fans that I see. I'm very appreciative of the fact that people say nice things to me. But this isn't false modesty. I'm a nobody, honestly. And if I disappeared tomorrow, at some point I will. Nobody will care. I mean, I spoke to a mate of mine who is a lot older than me, and when they brought out digital tickets, and obviously slightly off topic, but when they brought out digital tickets, and he was struggling with them and still struggles with them, he said to me, "I've been going home and away since the 50s, so he's seen a lot more games than I have." And he said, "If they're not careful, I'll stop going." And I said, "They won't care whether you go anymore. In fact, the modern City now will be glad if you don't go, because you get a concessionary ticket. You don't buy new shirts every year. You don't spend a fortune. You just go and watch the football because you love it, and you've been a dedicated City fan all your life." And that's how I feel about me too. When the time comes that I get completely disillusioned or can't afford to go or whatever, then nobody will care. That
I think and I want to say this quickly, that anyone that's listening to this or watching this later on after recording it that thinks, "Oh, is Haaland blowing smoke up Ian's backside there? Is he saying it because he's on a video with him? Is he saying it to try and look good to build his own profile or anything like that?" Being genuinely straight up with you, Ian, I genuinely do think that fans that watch this or fans that see you at matches genuinely do, kind of look forward to seeing you. And I say kind of look forward to seeing you. Do look forward to seeing you. And when they're on the way to the game, "Oh, I wonder if we'll see Ian today." And, you introduced a vlog with "I wonder who I'll meet today." I think people will introduce their afternoons or their mornings or their long trips down south as, do you think we'll see Ian near the pub or near the chippy today, or where do you think he'll be? Or I do think you become part of people's away days and part of people's journeys. And spot Ian Cheeseman, it's become a bit of a game for people maybe to try and spot you and find you and maybe get on the vlog and has maybe become part of the match day. And I think you did a podcast with us years ago, Ian, asking us what our match day routine is. I think that seeing Ian Cheeseman's part of people's routines. I think it becomes part of people's Saturdays, and I think you become part of City history. So it's very modest of you to say so, Ian. But friend to friend, I think you're very important to Blues all over the world.
Well, I don't know what I can say to that other than what I've already just said, which is that's not how I feel. I mean, I've been going home and away. People don't quite believe this. Obviously, I had 15 years at the BBC, but I've been going home and away since I was, well, since the 60s, the mid 70s, home and away, every game, every competitive first team game since the middle of the 70s, apart from a handful when I first joined the BBC, and I mean a handful. And a few of, well, most of the games behind closed doors. But it's getting harder and harder, more and more expensive, more and more time consuming. As we're recording this, we've got a 10-day period coming up where City play at Tottenham on the Wednesday, Bournemouth on the Saturday, Lisbon in midweek, Brighton the following Saturday. And that is a very expensive 10 days, a hell of a lot of travelling. I have a very, loving wife who understands what I do, and I'm very grateful for that. But more and more Champions League games. Now there's the FIFA World Cup next summer in America. I won't be going to that. That will be the end of my run, if you like, of games watching a first team. And as we're speaking today, there's talk of Barcelona playing Atletico Madrid now in Miami at a league game. And that's the direction football seems to be going in. And I'm sorry, that's the sort of thing that eventually will break me and mean that I give it all up. But I can't complain. I've had an amazing ride, and I'm very, very grateful for it. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. So thank you. I look around the room that I'm in at the moment. It's got memorabilia everywhere. I'm very lucky to have Vinny's captain's armband from 2012 and other keepsakes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for City. Thanks, Pep, for posing with the Champions League with me and all the rest of it. So I have got no complaints whatsoever. But the direction of travel is away from me, I'm afraid. But there'll be plenty of young new fans, particularly fans from other countries and further afield, who now have a new affection for the club that I've always loved. And I'm pleased for them, and I hope that they enjoy it as much as I did. But it's not the same as it was for me. I went in the hooligan infested 70s, and times when when clubs were struggling to fill the grounds, and now every ground seems to be full all the time, and clubs just seem to want to milk every penny they can get out of fans. But it is what it is, onwards and upwards.
You've got to have done well over 2,500 now, 2,600, something like that, Ian. To have done that since the mid-70s is absolutely unbelievable. But like you said, I mean, you were just waiting, weren't you, for that Champions League trophy to be lifted above, whether it be Vinny's or Ilkay's or Kevin's or Kyle Walker's head, whoever it may have been that lifted it, so long as somebody lifted that Champions League trophy and gave you the final sticker in your book, so to speak, for those that enjoy collecting stickers as kids. I know I did. Don't know if you did, Ian, Panini stickers, but that was the final sticker in your book, I think, and everything else now is swaps, you could say, in the old sticker term of, we've done it all before, so if I do it again, I'll keep it and I'll swap it with someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I self-indulgently filmed myself on the final whistle, which I don't normally do, because I could feel myself welling up and crying, and I thought perhaps I should just show how genuine this is. So there were tears at that moment. When I was commentating in 2012, I had to be professional because I was doing a job. But when I was in Istanbul for that Champions League final, yes, I was doing a match day vlog, and I was doing some work for Indian television as well. But in that moment when the final whistle went, I wasn't actually on air anywhere. So I was just reacting normally. So that was, the final sticker. Although I can't deny that, I was determined to be in Athens for the Super Cup as well, because City had never been involved in that or won that. Similarly, I was very, very lucky to be in Jeddah, because I've got a sponsor who was prepared to support me to go out there and watch the two games out there as well. And I thought they've got to win this now. They've got to win the Club World Cup, because they've won the Super Cup, but they've won the treble. And if they win this, then it's like sort of, that's it, done, finished, completed. Whatever happens in the future, they never win another trophy. Nobody can ever, and no matter what happens with 115 charges, or even if the club has trophies taken off them, as far as I'm concerned, as a human being watching my team,
Yeah.
If I was a Lance Armstrong fan, I don't want to draw parallels particularly between him and City, but if I'd have gone out to the Tour de France supporting him and seen him win it, all right, he's had the title stripped off him because he cheated. But I still had the adventure of being out there and watching him win it and cheering on the winner. And that's how I feel about City. I don't believe for 1 second they're going to be found guilty, by the way. But even if the worst case scenario happened, I've lived the dream, absolutely lived the dream. And so if the final sticker in the final book, the final tick was probably the final whistle in Jeddah when City won the FIFA Club World Cup.
So Ian, an absolutely fascinating insight into your life as a City fan. Again, obviously you explain it very eloquently on the podcast regularly, but your European journeys sometimes fall into the podcast, but very rarely do you talk too much about your journeys on away days. You more ask us about our perspectives on the games and the like, but really fascinating to understand what it means to you. I mean, you've expressed it many times on the vlogs when you've done the vlogs, when you've wrapped the vlogs up, but to understand that the journey in your mind is either completed or almost completed is something that I think fans will find amazing on one hand and also sad as well, because it's almost like, how can you go from not winning anything and dreaming of winning everything that we've won to winning it all in 20 years? It's almost like a fast-track train ticket from one end of the country to the other, and everybody else is looking around, and you know who I'm talking about in terms of everybody else going, hang on, that's not right. And quite frankly, we've done it, and you've been on that shuttle service, mate. You've been on that train. You've been on that very, very, very important football special. Ian, one more thing then, 500 days. Now, it doesn't have to be within the 500 days. It can be in your whole Champions League City journey. So from the moment that we qualified and played Napoli in that first game, where Cavani scored for them, right until the very, very moment that we won the Champions League. Now, you can't have anything after the Champions League win, because, of course, we're celebrating up until that point. But I want you to build me an 11, just now, just live, so it's got that raw emotion to it. From goalkeeper to forward players, a starting 11 of your all-time City Champions League 11 from the first game in 2011 to the night that we won it in Istanbul.
Well, Joe Hart in goal. Never forget those saves in Barcelona that he did, were amazing. Pablo Zabaleta, because he's Pablo Zabaleta, and an absolute legend and a hero. You can just see him wearing that bandana, blood coming out of his injuries and whatnot. Vincent Kompany, captain leader. Gael Clichy, loved at left back, so I'd have him at left back. Alongside Vincent Kompany, to me, there isn't quite the same standout options. I mean, people say there are a few, but I think it might seem a strange one because he's relatively new, but Manuel Akanji has been very impressive for me on the left-hand side of the two at the back, so I'd go with him. Rodri can't argue with, but I love Fernandinho as well, so this isn't meant to be a particular formation. It's just my way of squeezing them in, but I think I'd pick them both, Rodri and Fernandinho. I was a little bit before that period. So that leaves then sort of...
so you're playing Rodri and Fernandinho as a two in front, protecting the back four?
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, if I was actually picking a team, I might be a bit more practical. I'm picking these players with sentiment. Mm-hmm. So I'd pick the two, so that gives you 6, and a goalkeeper is 7. So that leaves me with 4 more, 3 in midfield and 1 up top. The one up top would be Sergio Aguero, without any question. 3 in midfield, Kevin De Bruyne and David Silva pick themselves, and then I probably, again, through sentiment and consistency, would go for Ilkay Gundogan, the captain who lifted the trophy in the end. So that would be my 11.
Joe Hart in between the sticks, who, quite frankly, without, we wouldn't have won the league title in 2012. As good as Sergio was, as good as Carlos Tevez was when he came back, as good as Yaya was in the season and in the closing stages of that season, especially Newcastle 2-0 away from home. Some of the saves Joe Hart pulled out in games mid-season, start of the season, and into that back end again, which is where we always come alive, clearly were hugely important in what we went on to achieve that season. So your team is pretty much pretty much sentimental, however, definitely strong and with huge amounts of will and determination throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm not saying that is the best 11 or the best formation. I'm just saying those are the 11 players that I will remember the fondest.
Now, them players are slightly out of position in a 4-2-3-1. Does Pep Guardiola get that team to play and win the Champions League, Ian?
He gets any team to play. If he picked you and me, Harlan, we'd still have won the Champions League. The guy is an absolute genius. I've said this many times to people. Sometimes he picks a team that baffles me a little bit, and they still go there and win. And I think, what the hell do I know? His genius is knowing how to get players to play into the gaps and the shapes and the lines and all the rest of it, like no other player can. In fact, I saw a quote today, and I can't remember which player it was, but talking about the fact that they, had received instructions from. I tell you, it was Zinchenko. I saw a quote from Zinchenko saying that Zinchenko had talked back to Pep in the training session because he'd challenged something he'd said to him. So Pep stopped. This is allegedly, of course. I can't say it definitely happened. And Pep stopped the training session and said, "Right, off we go then." And he said, "Well, all I did was challenge you." And he says, "Do it my way or the highway," type of thing. And whilst that might sound a little bit harsh, it just shows the influence of Pep. The reason Cole Palmer didn't stay, and Cancelo couldn't hack it, and maybe even somebody like Emerick Laporte, who I was a big fan of, and could have been quite close to actually being the Akanji alternative, on the left-hand side of central defence. Pep's all about discipline and following instructions, and I'm not a huge Jack Grealish fan, for example, but those who praise Jack Grealish argue that he's being told by Pep Guardiola to play in a particular position in a particular way, and that's why you're not seeing the best of Grealish. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is another illustration of how tight the discipline is that Pep uses and the way he does it. So that 11 that I picked would definitely won the Champions League under Pep Guardiola.
Absolutely. I think I've got to agree. I mean, he'd get De Bruyne to play as a right winger. He'd certainly have David Silva chalk on his boots on the left-hand side and evolve him as a player. I think Ilkay Gundogan's clearly proven he's able to play as a 10. He's able to play as an 8 or a 6. I think, you look at Aguero, he could create chances out of nothing. He made it so easy and to roll the defender with his back to goal when everything looked like it wasn't going to happen. Swivel and take one touch out of his feet and find the postage stamp area of the goal. I think it's fair to say. I think, the age-old debate now will be that because of the FIFA generation, because of the fantasy football generation, that players like Sergio will be forever underrated. And it's only the fastest players on FIFA with the best stats and that kind of thing. And not that I'm going into that realm on this with you, Ian, but I think I do fear for, and I'm not trying to sound old or, cantankerous at 30 or anything really, but I think the reality is now that I do worry for the next generation of football fans. And I'm saying Bernardo Silva, and I'm being told, he's rubbish. Why? Surely it's Erling Haaland, surely it's De Bruyne, surely it's Phil Foden or this player, that player, or the other. And, why do you like Gundogan? Surely he's not as good as De Bruyne. And I think, we've got to a point now where statistics dominate football, and unfortunately we're no longer able to watch it with our eyes and enjoy the spectacle that is the spherical object that gets played or passed or manoeuvred around a wonderful piece of textured, 1 centimetre grass, with the smell of hot dogs roaring from the stands, with your best pals and your family around you watching this game that you are obsessed with on a Saturday afternoon, with the sole aim to see your club, Manchester City, win the 3 points and eventually try and compete for an 8th place finish or 7th place finish in the Premier League. And, of course, now that the aim's changed, and that is to go win the title every year. But when you strip it back, Ian, did a 2003 version of Ian Cheeseman ever think that we'd reached the heights that we'd reached? And, if it was to all disappear and you were to be sat there in your seat, Ian, at the Sparta Prague game, Ian, tomorrow, and this will potentially be Wednesday that you watch this, you might already have gotten home from the game, Ian. You were to close your eyes in the middle of that game in the same stadium and be rewound straight back to TNS 2003, and you didn't know what the future looked like, are you still just as proud to be a Blue?
Of course. It wouldn't have made any difference if we hadn't won any of that stuff. It's just a nice bonus. I can't deny that on the day I came home from work, on the day that Sheikh Mansour took over, I told my family to expect City to win every trophy, to have all the best players, to have the best manager, and all your dreams to come true. I believed it on that day, and it all happened. But I did also say, at the same time, we're likely to morph into everything you don't like about Stretford Rangers, and I'm afraid we've done that as well. So there is a price to pay for what you have, but I've enjoyed the on-field football as much as I possibly could. So lucky, so grateful, so blessed. Thank you, Manchester City, for being such a big part of my life.
It's a wonderful way to finish, Ian, and obviously, genuinely friend to friend, first and foremost, to thank you for your honesty and for your insight. And I'm always mesmerised by your journey, and I'd love to be able to have a USB of your mind. One day when you unfortunately have to leave us, please, if anybody knows out there how to transfer Ian Cheeseman's City journey onto a USB stick and give everybody on Forever Blue that's younger than him, and all City fans that are able to access one of those, or that are young enough to get one of those, a copy of it, because I'd love to be able to go and tap into all of your memories, Ian. And there's not long enough on a Zoom recording or any podcast really to fully understand your journey, but I can only say thank you for sharing it with me over the years I've known you, and I'm sure that people are dying to hear more, so hopefully we can do it again on either Forever Blue, or me and you can do it again, or maybe get other people on to find out more about your journey as a Blue.
I did actually, during lockdown, write my autobiography. I don't think I'll ever publish it, but I did do it as something to fill time up in during lockdown. It's a long story, and even then there's lots of stuff that won't be in there. So who knows? Maybe one day that'll come out.
If it doesn't come out, Ian, it's fair to say that I would be hugely appreciative of a copy, because you wrote a book called The Best Job in the World, and I'm sure that if I got to read the best City fan in the world, or the journey of one of City's loyalist fans, Ian Cheeseman, you better believe I'd love to read it, because it'd be hugely insightful for all Blues to read. Ian, I want to interview you again. I want to speak to you again on a really honest level about your career, about journalism, about your journey. Tap into your experience. There's a lot of people that would love to know how you started. The rungs of the ladder that you climbed to get to where you've gotten to, and how a young guy from Manchester that went via hospital radio at Oldham Hospital arrived at the BBC, with a camera in hand to vlog well over 400 City matches, and create a podcast that, quite frankly, is loved by all Blues around the world. So in January, when I launch my new podcast, it'd be really great if we could do as we said we'd do, and get together and do a background on who you are. I know you've wrote the autobiography, but it'd be great to do a video version of Ian Cheeseman's journey through journalism and sport.
Happy to help.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian. All the best, and have a great week, and see you on Forever Blue. Because it is, Ian, and I'll let you say it, of course, great to be a what, Ian?
It's great to be a Blue.